cider, hard cider, required a bottle opener. So our absence was a little longer than I expected. But this right here is why my YouTube video is set up as not for kids. But we are going to look, because this is a test, still our test broadcast here, we are going to look and see if we are streaming on YouTube. Because we just don't know. So, whoever it is that just logged in, thank you. Just so you know, this hand, you can join us at this Skype address up here. If you want to basically call into our broadcast right here, you can also send us a message and we will get it and we will flash it up on the screen and we will be all good. So I am very excited to see whoever it is that is here. Forgive me for looking at my phone here. I am trying to... Hi, Mother. My mother is awake. Why is my mother awake? This seems very late for my mother to be awake. Ani is back. Yeah, it is fun. Wheel of Time series. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. We can talk Wheel of Time. Any specific topic on Wheel of Time? I mean, it's a very, very long book. What am I talking about? They are all very long books, but it is a very long series, Ani. So what about the Wheel of Time? Because that is a whole can of worms. Everyone is awake. We are all awake. We are all awakening, including my mother, who is here. It's kind of cheesy to say hi, Mom, but hi, Mom. Good to see you. I don't know what is up with YouTube and or whether or not I'm live streaming on there, but we will have to see. Wheel of Time is so long. It is very long. And this, Ani, your influence, now I'm drinking, but I'm not day drinking like you are. So, Mom, what is it that has you up so late? Can you see an angle to your topic? From Wheel of Time to The Stand, or another topic in general? I'm not entirely sure. Yes, entertaining. Wheel of Time, remarkably entertaining. And it is a topic that I intended to address eventually, as it seems every YouTube personal question. Okay, my mother apparently has a personal question. End times beginning to... Very true, Ani, very true. My mother has a personal question. I'm curious, is she questioning based on our previous discussion? Is a good question here. Okay, so we should be connected to all of these. All right. So this is interesting because I am able to see who is on what stream. That's excellent. All right. So coming back to the topic, Ani, Wheel of Time, what about it? My mother, personal question, end times, beginning times. So, well, if time is a wheel, then the end times are the beginning times. Oh, not your question was personal. Why do you think I awoke? I don't know. Did it notify my mother? Did it notify you, Mother, that I was live? Or I don't know why. I don't know. I'm so confused. I'm so confused. But thank you all. We've got 10 people here for my confusion. Remember, you can join the Skype conversation by opening up Skype and going here. So I wonder, Ani, do you have an observation on the end times, the beginning time, and beginning times, and time as a wheel? I mean, hence the wheel of time. There is a point at which there's a, I don't know, there's one thing, I don't want to be a spoiler. There's a thing in one of the later books about an illness going around. Okay. I guess I'm thinking metaphysical conceit. There's a sense of stand of continuity throughout. Yes. Okay. Now, see, you're more clever than I am. So yeah, metaphysically, there's the whole. I don't know. I've kind of wondered in Wheel of Time, and if not Wheel of Time, in The Stand, and you all can correct me or certainly chime in. I kind of felt that there was this sense of inevitability a little bit in The Stand, that, it would, things go in patterns. We had society get to this point, and there's this thing that I think the characters Glenn Bateman says in The Stand. He's talking about them when they turn the power back on. He's a little cranky, and he's talking about how, the first thing they do is go right back to the mechanism. Everything gets sort of cleared out, and they start fresh, and the first thing they do is try and get back to that sort of pattern of behavior that caused the inevitable downfall of society to begin with. Like something is pulling. Yeah. So Ani is saying like something is pulling the strings, but really a rebirth into the new age, etc. But I find myself wondering in The Stand when, of course, we would be done for here in Las Vegas unless we left Las Vegas. But, can they really destroy all evil in the world? I mean, that's the one thing about The Stand that always seemed to me to be rather silly. Yeah, and Ani's saying it's really them, but the supernatural is applied, and it is. It's clear in the book that there is a higher force at work. They have dreams, and they choose whether to be good or bad. But I don't know. I think I'd go to Boulder. Just saying. I don't know that I would work with Randall Flagg if the dreams came. Maybe I would. I'd like to think and be blown to bits. Yeah, I'd like to think that. Here I'll just put a series of. Ani says we would work with Randall Flagg, and be blown to bits. So yeah, I get what you're saying. I have a hard time, though, I got to admit, looking at The Stand, I do have a little bit of difficulty seeing it not in an overall larger context. I mean, initially for the channel, I had some plans, and those plans, of course, any plan goes awry after the beginning. The first plan that I had was, and that I prepared for, is I'm going to be looking at a lot of series of books that were impactful and important in terms of the influence that they had creating series of books that exist now. So, for example, we have the Wheel of Time, which seems to be something that's kind of insular in the 14 or so books that exist. But what were the influences on Wheel of Time? And if there was an earlier series that had not existed, would the Wheel of Time exist? So one example is I am looking at Michael Moorcock's Elric of Melniboné series. I'm starting with the series that influenced me in my writing and the novels that I write. And one of those series is the Elric of Melniboné series, which is phenomenal. If you haven't read it, I would highly recommend it, and I'm sure I'll do a video that indicates why you should read it, or why you should read it as it applies to other things. But the author in the series was a huge influence on any number of authors, and I want you to come back and see that video, so I don't want to spoil it for you. But that series of books directly impacted the Witcher series of books. Is my Aunt B on? Apparently. Hi, Aunt B. I didn't see you come in, but hello if you're here. So there's a series of books that's very popular right now that had Elric of Melniboné not existed, that series would also not exist. Another series of books that I'm looking at is the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant the Unbeliever, and how his work, I know for a fact that his work, Stephen R. Donaldson, who wrote that series, was also an influence on The Stand specifically. So looking at a series of books that I read that were influenced on my work, and what other authors were influenced by those series of books, because I can't speak for anyone who's on the channel, and the one unfortunate thing that we have here is, unless you say hi in the comments, I can't from my screen tell who is actually watching the live stream. But, not to speak for anyone else, but the truth is that I run out of stuff to read. I run out of stuff to read. And when I do, I kind of want to see where those books come from, or what's in the vein of the book that I just read. Many of you know I'm a huge Jim Butcher fan. And it's easy to kind of just see where his influences are, but I read his stuff and then I run out of stuff to read, and then I want to find other stuff to read. But I have another video planned which is talking about some of the more modern fantasy writers and pros and cons about some of the newer fantasy writers, or at least for me, in my opinion. Nonetheless, I kind of got sidetracked with The Stand, and on The Stand again, Ani has another comment, and always valuable. I guess it would be metaphysical because we do screw ourselves up and we have to reset. It's not a tangible thing until it is. Like now, there's a darkness that must be overcome. Exactly, and that's true. And that's going to get to the point that I was going to get to, but I do want to answer your question. You said, when is Peace Talks supposed to come out? It is supposed to come out in July. It is already available for pre-order, both on it's on pre-order and hardcover, and you can also, if you're an audiobook person as I am, you can also pre-order Peace Talks on audiobook, and it comes out in July. I could give you the exact date, but I can't tell you exactly. I just know that it is July, and I'm happily awaiting my copy. So the point I was getting at with talking about series is that it's hard for me to look at The Stand anymore without looking at the overall mythology incorporating the Stephen King multiverse and incorporating all of the Dark Tower books and how they relate to each other and relate to other books in the Stephen King canon. And The Stand is very much one of those books that is Dark Tower related. And having explored all of the Dark Tower books, and that's a lot of pages and a lot of words. There's other ones that I can't distinguish from the Dark Tower anymore. I mean, one of them obviously is The Stand. One of them is The Talisman. I can't think of The Talisman without thinking of the Dark Tower. There are just so many books that are Dark Tower related overall. The Stand being so full fully Dark Tower related, if you looked at the whole mythos and the whole mythology, that it's hard for me to distinguish the metaphysical questions with regard to the stand without also looking at the metaphysical questions encompassed in the Dark Tower. But as you said, it would be metaphysical because we do screw ourselves up and need to reset. It's not a tangible thing until it is. Like now there's a darkness that must be overcome. I don't know. It kind of feels that way. I mean, it kind of feels like society's going to hell in a handbasket. And I think that this particular pandemic that we're dealing with is a little bit more of a wake-up call. As we talked about, or I talked about, and you all commented on in the earlier part of the live stream before we took a break, was that the timeline in the stand is so rapid. The first couple of weeks really is all that we're dealing in the books, in the world of the books, is all that we're dealing with regard to the actual illness, Captain Trips. And it decimates most of society in a matter of days, weeks at most. And the rest of what we're dealing with is the ramifications of the survivors and dealing with how they move on in a world that's basically been decimated and thrown ass over tea kettle. We're getting just a tiny taste of a world being thrown ass over tea kettle, and we're just coming into the beginning of our journey with our own global pandemic. But ours is nothing like Captain Trips. We're talking about a fraction, and he doesn't really go into ultimate. It's got like 100% or 98%, not ours, but Captain Trips. Just want to be clear, has like a 98% mortality rate and a virtually, except for those who are immune to the actual symptomology, it's got virtually 100% communicability rate. And, you get it, you're not immune, you're dead. In our situation right now is nothing like that. And so initially I was a little bit concerned about whether or not to explore this book, although I was putting other things on hold to revisit the material myself, because I didn't want to be alarmist. I didn't want anybody to be scared. I didn't want to use the hyperbole of a fiction novel in a way that was going to create greater fear among anyone who might happen to watch the content that I put out there. But I do think there are lessons to be learned. And with regard to what, Ani, you were saying about the metaphysical, is there is that metaphysical hand, a literal hand at the end of the book, but there's people are having the same dreams. They're driven to go to certain places by the dreams that they're having. There is a guiding force behind Mother Abigail. There is a driving force behind Randall Flagg. Now we find out later on, if we look at the totality of the Dark Tower series, we find out later on Glenn Bateman, who, when he's in jail in Las Vegas towards the end of the stand, and I apologize, almost all of my material that I ever discuss will be full of spoilers. So if that's not your deal, then that's okay. I understand. But when Glenn Bateman makes the analogy of Randall Flagg talking about him being just another cockroach running little roach errands, that really is true when you look at his place, that character's place, in the totality of the Stephen King multiverse as expressed to us through the Dark Tower series and other books that have come out since. I did hear a comment come through here, so I want to address it. And Ani says, you can say what's in the stand and all these books, even short stories like The Devil and Tom Walker, and this is this malevolous otherness, but when you look, it is us staring back in the mirror. And I wouldn't argue with that assumption. It's kind of the evil that we bring, and the way Stephen King deals with it is he talks about multiple levels of the tower, and each reality exists on various levels, of the Dark Tower. And when we get to the end of it, what allows that evil to thrive is very much the way that people react to the introduction of those chaotic forces on multiple levels of the tower. So the world of the stand, sort of maybe that central reality, is wiped out. But what happens to that world afterward, we don't know. I mean, the most that we get is Franny's baby is born and it struggles with the flu, but then it overcomes the flu. And the idea is that once both parents are immune, this next generation of children will be fine, and the human race will be able to build back up again, and hopefully in a better way than the world that caused the destruction that we see in the course of the book. We won't have basically all of those survivors split half and half, but who's to say, by the same token, that when another generation of babies is born in the world of the stand, that they're not just gonna go about building up their world, and ultimately causing another destructive force or destructive factor that sets the whole thing going again. And if that's what you're talking about with regard to a similarity between, the Stand or the Stephen King multiverse and the Wheel of Time series, then, toast to you, because yeah, it's certainly there. But, on a more metaphysical bent as well, there are those who look at our society, look at our world, and are of the belief system that, there have been many civilizations on this world, or this planet, that have risen and basically evolved themselves out of existence because of human nature, and then set us back to the Stone Age and then do it over again, and set us back to the Stone Age and do it over again. And now we can all go to have a watch party of Ancient Aliens too. So, and I don't say that dismissively. I happen to be one who believes that there have been multiple civilizations, advanced civilizations on this planet in humankind, and they reach a certain level of development, and then they, because they are who they are, because we are who we are, human nature, they ultimately bring about their own destruction. But Ani had another comment here, and her comments are always enlightening. Wow, this is a biggie. What we are seeing is a shift in elite. As a history teacher, we are just seeing what we've seen before, and authors tap in to that, and the horror of it is just reflecting what we have allowed. Maybe I'm dissecting this too much through device. As for your children comment, like the indigo children born. Well, I'm on the fence about the indigo children, to tell you the truth. But that's a much broader thing. Not like we're staying on track anyway, but that's a really broad topic. A lot of what you're saying is kind of inspiring me to maybe do a whole Inkstain network and add modern metaphysical to that, as well as progressive voice and any number of things. But no, I mean, we are in a unique time. We are in a time of transition, and authors do tap into that. And sometimes the times Wow, that seemed weird. That was a weird turn of phrase. But sometimes the times in which we live kind of outpace us. I mean, I'll give you a good example. My novel, Gnome for Hire, which, Ani, I know you've read earlier drafts of, and most other people here probably haven't even heard the name or know it exists. That will change as I will be doing some readings on the channel eventually. But one of the things that's in there is there's a whole thing about cell phones. And in Gnome for Hire, I started writing that novel before we had smartphones. Smartphones didn't exist yet when I started writing that book. So instead of cell phones or smartphones, the device that I was using for this pixie to inhabit was a Palm Pilot, basically a PDA. But then by the time, I got several drafts along, because the day job interferes with the work very often, then we had smartphones. So I had to go back and retool, 100,000 some odd words to incorporate smartphones instead of PDAs and all of the things that go along with that. I mean, we talk in the book. Hold on. I will be right back with you. Got to flip the camera here. Oompa Loompa. Okay. So the smartphones now, I mean, I look at my phone, right? Here's my phone. Gotta love my phone, but one of the issues with smartphones is that they have so much capacity now. I mean, my smartphone now, gosh, I'm going to have to do math. Don't want to do math. I'm afraid to do math. But the smartphone that I have now is exponentially more powerful than the laptop computer that got me all the way through grad school. So the limitations that I had placed on what could be done with the PDA in the novel and what the Pixie had to do and how overworked the Pixie was working in the PDA, my mind, because I'm a writer, so I'm kind of freaky by nature, one of the things in my mind was, well, gosh, how much would this young man really have had to do? How much computing would he have had to do on a smartphone? How much work would he have had to do on a smartphone to basically retire the poor pixie that lives inside the smartphone? That's like a whole order of magnitude greater than what Eleanor Rigby, the protagonist of the book, it's an order of magnitude greater than what he would have had to do to basically kill his PDA in terms of what he used it for. So it's something that changes, and as writers, we change with the times. Much of the themes in Gnome for Hire is about self-acceptance. There are themes in there which were enlightened for the time but are now sort of old school, on the back burner. So the question is, do the times, and I'm looking at what Ani had typed here, which is weird time, weird thought on things, and that's very true. And sometimes as writers, as we're trying to parallel the times or write through allegory so that our work is relevant and conscious of the times in which it's created, sometimes the times outpace us and we have to go back, and it takes longer for the material to come out, which is one of the reasons why in my second novel Sweeper, I said, which you don't, but you will hopefully at some point know. In my second novel Sweeper, I chose to address things that are kind of out of time. It's not as, while there are still things that are relevant, and there are things that will always be relevant. Allegorically, it's not so dated. But there are still things. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. When I started writing Sweeper, which was a lot more recently than I had written Gnome for Hire, I had wanted to give the main character a hybrid vehicle. And he was driving a Prius V, which is kind of like a crossover vehicle, the largest of sort of like the Prius line. And at the time, the reason I had chosen a Prius V was because it was about as close as you could get to a hybrid SUV. It had a lot of space to carry stuff, but it was still a hybrid. Well, since I started that book, we now actually have hybrid SUVs. We actually have luxury hybrid SUVs. So, I mean, it sounds like something trivial, but when you're copy editing a 100,000 plus word manuscript, you then have to go back and excise all of those references that are then outdated. But yes, as Ani said, in her comment here, there are changes with time, but some things never change. And although the size of this box is not one of them, some things never change. That's absolutely right. And that's why one of the reasons why with Sweeper, which is not for young adults, but for actual adults, I chose themes that were related to patterns that have recurred over time, so one could reasonably estimate that those same types of patterns would recur again, and it keeps the primary themes in the novel from becoming outdated. Although there are some things, like the Prius V, that you can't really change. That you can't really prepare for in terms of changing. But here's a question: if anyone, currently on the street would like to answer it. As a writer, one of the things I struggle with is a lot of the people, the authors that I enjoy, they're witty and they tend to be funny, and they often have witticisms that invoke pop culture references. And, I've heard some people say, well, that kind of dates the book so that, it won't last. I don't know. Do you agree with that? I tend to think that those pop culture references, if they're done well, become more statements on a time that we can look back on nostalgically, even if they are, happening at a time when the book is happening at a time when they're more relevant. If they're chosen wisely, they can be looked on fondly with nostalgia. At least that's the way I feel about it. But, as I mentioned before, I am a significant Jim Butcher fan, and the Dresden Files are chock full of pop culture references. But one thing I will tell you, and I can tell you with certainty, monkeys flinging poo never gets old, particularly when the poo is flaming poo from supernatural monkeys. Just saying. Just putting it out there. Some classics never die. And Monkeys Flinging Poo is one of those classics. Do you agree? Do you not agree? Hit us up with a comment here. Again, you can join the Skype conversation if you want to. If you want to sign into Skype, if you input this Skype address, you can join me via voice. Kind of like calling into a broadcast. Currently, I'm the only person on the call, but if I have another person on the call, I can go ahead and pop them up on the screen, much like this. But right now, there's no one in the room, so that isn't going to do anything for any of us except have us look at the Skype symbol for a while. So, monkeys flinging poo, classic never dies, or outdated metaphor? You decide. Exactly. See, But Ani, you're ahead of yourself. I hadn't offered. I already owe you a coffee from earlier, and I had not. I had not put out the offer to buy coffee for whoever can tell me what book the flaming monkey poo appears in. But I will do this. For those of you who have read the Dresden Files and hopefully love them as much as I do, what other significant character makes an appearance for the first time in Blood Rights? And it is closely related to the flaming monkey poo. So answer that, and I owe you a coffee. And eventually, a coffee maker will suffice. We're not quite there yet. This was Adi's answer. A coffee maker will suffice. We're not quite there yet. However, if the same people keep getting the questions that I throw out there, I'm going to have to start not offering coffees, but offering gift cards. And I'm too broke for that. But I will leave that up there. What other significant character makes its first appearance in the Dresden Files novel, Blood Rights, which is, of course, the novel that begins with the ever-popular flaming monkey poo. So there's that. Yeah, she got it. Okay. Mouse does make his first appearance. In fact, we encounter the flaming monkey poo while saving Mouse and his actual siblings. Can use my coffee maker. My mom is still awake, which makes me happy, but almost makes me feel guilty at the same time. Can use my coffee maker that she gave me. Yes, because she's my mother, and so she didn't even have to get geek book trivia to have me provide her with a coffee maker. It was a Keurig. I think she's upgraded, or I upgraded her Keurig somewhere. I got her on the Keurig because I had to visit, and I'm a big Keurig fan. Wow, we are like going way afield. I'm trying to remember where I started with this one. The Multiverse, The Stand, and other such incorporations. Michael Moorcock, remember that name? And yes, that is the guy's name. Remember, Michael Moorcock wrote primarily the biggest thing that you might know would be the Elric of Melniboné series. Introduced the character of Elric, which is incredibly iconic and important for many, many fantasy authors, but he is also credited as being the first author to truly put down in fantasy literature the idea of the multiverse, or more specifically, the eternal champion who exists in all of the multiverse kind of at the same time. An idea which we also encounter in Stephen King in various incarnations. Here's a really, really, really digging into the geek trivia for you. Maybe giving myself away, maybe not. I don't care. It's late and we're self-quarantined. But is there a concept in the Dark Tower that you know of that is directly influenced by Michael Moorcock's Eternal Champion concept that is worth multiple cups of coffee if you do have that information in your pocket? That's really digging deep into sort of geek trivia. But hey, that's what we do. We call it the Ink Stain Channel for a reason, or we being the royal we, me, myself, I, Obi, my dog, Mackie, my other dog. We converse. We're tight that way. And so, yeah, it's the way that authors impact other authors is really very much a big part of what we will be doing on Inkstain channel is exploring that. I'll also be exploring that through the influences on my writing. And we'll also be talking about what makes a good critique or a good review. We'll also have writing tips and some tricks, some advice on how to get moving. Right now, I don't feel qualified to give you advice on how to get published, although I understand it. That is something that is so truly beyond your control and truly beyond my control. I may be doing a self-publishing journey not too long from now, and I will share that journey with you as we go. Again, one of the other things that I will be doing, and I'll probably start doing this soon while we're self-quarantined, just because it'll be fun, I think. If you disagree, I apologize. I think it'll be fun. I will be doing some reading as if in audiobook for, some of my books. I have been encouraged that wow, Biden moment. Whew. Over that. Sorry, political there. But one of the things that I've also been encouraged to do is share some poetry with you. And also, I have a disagreement, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. And this is everybody, your thoughts out there, in the world as I view you through the lens of my camera. Do you think it is possible to critique poetry? I do. I have a long-standing disagreement with someone close to me, in proximity, actually. One of my roommates / renters. He doesn't think that you can critique poetry or that you can teach someone how to write poetry. I disagree. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are about it, particularly those of you who might be out there that teach English or teach writing as well. I do believe that you can. I do believe that you can pretty much objectively critique poetry, but you'll see more about critique or reviewing on a video I'm putting together on what makes a good review. A good review, just as a precursor, has very little to do with what you like or don't like. And I find that very often in the blogosphere or the YouTube sphere, we far too often have people that mistake putting forth their personal opinion for an actual review. And we see that a lot. We can chalk it up, or I chalk it up, to a decline in journalism, a decline in actually writing objectively as opposed to writing to influence. To me, journalism should be about giving you information, giving you the facts, and having you make up your own mind. And I think one of the problems that we see this in corporate media all the time. Yes, I said it, corporate media, is they don't report news anymore. They take in news, filter it through their opinion, and give you their opinion as news, which I don't think is appropriate. And it's the same thing that we have in terms of reviewing or critiquing. There's the subjective and the objective. Objective is, we live in a world of, alternative facts, but I don't believe that facts can really be alternative. Facts are facts. They can lead us to alternative interpretations, but facts are still facts. And with news, and in the media as a whole, and that includes reviewers, their purpose is to give us information, and from that information we extrapolate our own opinion based on our personal experiences. That's, at least in my view, how it should be. It shouldn't be I intake information, filter it through my prejudices, and then spit it back out to you as fact. That's not how it should go. But we have another comment. Poetry, like all writing, is an art. I also used to teach art back in Michigan. If you can critique physical art, you can critique written art. Absolutely, yes. But I'm not saying but in a sense of disagreeing with you. I'm saying there are those who don't believe that you can critique physical art either, and I feel that that's also inaccurate. But then again, excuse me. Then again, there are those who spend much of their lives learning a craft, learning the craft that is art. And by art, I mean all forms of art, from the literary arts to the performing arts to the visual arts. All of these things that make up what we often refer to as the humanities. And all of the humanities are there to help you learn perspectives. But those perspectives are not always that effort to help us look at things through different perspectives is not always well done. And that's where critique lies. It's not in what someone is trying to say. It's in how they say it, and is how they say it effective. And that's a really gross generalization. It's topic for a whole video that I'm going to be putting up on Inkstein channel. Because our news today is a result of Reagan getting rid of 1949 fairness doctrine back in 87. It's how Rush Limbaugh and Fox News in the 90s rose to prominence. Fount of information. This is why Annika Richards is so fascinating. She knows so much about so many, many things, and refuses to stay on the surface, and that's good. We appreciate that. I'm not critiquing a refusal to stay on the surface of a discussion. I would love to dig deep. I always do love to dig deep, and sometimes that is why my content rambles, and I know it. And if you like my ramble, then join us. If you hate my ramble, unfortunately, you're going to hate me. Well, not me, but the ramble and the content. Yeah, I mean, it's talking about how the world changes and how things change. I mean, not to get terribly political here, because that's another channel. You're not boring. Ani says, I'm boring. I just read a lot. She's not boring by a long shot. She introduced me to Space Pants. Anybody that introduces me to Space Pants cannot be boring. So there are so many things that we think are the way that things have always been, and they aren't. Without going too crazy political here, because like I said, that's another channel. Like health insurance. For-profit health insurance was illegal in this country until 1972. That's the year before I was born, and I'm not all that old. So it hasn't been very long that we have had a for-profit, cutthroat, mercenary, and predatory health insurance system. We can thank Richard Nixon for that one. Prior to other cuts in education, many public colleges and universities were tuition free. In fact, the baby boomers who are so dead set against tuition free college, many of them went to public colleges and universities either free of tuition or virtually free of tuition. And I don't say that to pick on the boomers. I say that in relative terms, in terms of a time frame, that if we look at people that are still old, yes, we can thank Milton Friedman. There we go. Here we go. More. Look it up. Anytime Ani posts something, make a note to Google it later. because you will go doctors in a Dr. Seussian journey of the places we'll go. But I don't. Again, I don't talk about that in terms of public colleges and universities being tuition free for boomers, to pick on boomers. I mention it because people are. What I'm saying is people are still alive now who were able to take advantage, and rightly so, but we're able to take advantage of policies that we're fighting for now that used to exist during the lifetimes of many, many people who are still alive. So none of these are radical ideas. Proof. Supply side economics got us into our former conversation exactly. Supply side economics. I also wanted to give a shout out. Anyone wants to look up MMA, that's a worthy amount of your time. Yes, I have read Naomi Klein's The Shock Doctrine. Sorry, didn't post that up there. Economic shocks force change. Yes, they do. Again, the only reason I'm not going deeper into that is because, again, that's another. I don't want to alienate book lovers. Well, that's weird to alienate book lovers by talking about books, but primarily we talk about Inkstand Channel was a fiction exploration chat kind of deal. Progressive Voice, on the other hand, if you look on Inkstand Channel, you will on YouTube or here, you will see probably links to Progressive Voice and vice versa. That's the channel where I do actual political commentary. And so, yet in an election year we get socialism, in a non-election year we get privatization. Well, we've got socialism for the wealthy and corporations, and rugged individualism for everyone else, like actual people who need their government to use their tax money to provide them with services. But yeah, again, someone's determined to take me down that road. But where we look at in terms of the stand, I think the stand is more of a response to Stephen King's experiences, and his. I was going to say his experiences and his experiences, but the influences on his point of view based on his growing up, the time of his growing up, the time period in which he grew up, and the wars and changes that happened during that time, and a massive distrust of the government and the military, which isn't necessarily gone today. Far from it. But in the stand, the virus is created by the military, and because of a malfunction in containment, it gets out. So that's not, by all accounts, that's not what we're dealing with. And again, our pandemic that has caused us to be together right now, and that to me is one of the positives, is our finding other ways to connect and share a community. Our situation now is not remotely similar to the global pandemic that exists in the stand. I just want to say that again. Yes, bringing this out there. You know how scary the Cold War was? Sure, King would tap that fear. Absolutely. The Cold War was scary, y'all. You were teaching the Cold War Friday. I'm impressed because far too often, well, I'm always impressed with Ani Richards, but so often we don't get that far in American history classes. When I was growing up in world history or modern, or we got maybe to World War II, and then we ran out of time. And so a huge gap, and that's why young people have such a gap in the history that actually impacts what's going on in their lives today. Very often is that the modern American history is almost an afterthought to history that is not necessarily as impactful on their daily lives anymore. So, we deal with that reality. I'm thrilled to hear that, Ani, that you were teaching the Cold War on Friday. It was an interesting time. You guys are probably already seeing these comments, so my posting them on the screen may be redundant, but yes, I was showing them atomic bombs blowing up on my overhead. They were terrified by the Tsar Bomba. Yeah, who wouldn't be? And that stuff where we live. This of course, this stream is coming to you from Las Vegas. Wow, pulling a Biden again. In terms of the stand, we are kind of looking at, this would be the underground of, Randall Flag Country, I guess. And, camera, reboot. And again, it's like Mike TV from Willy Wonka. Y'all, the reason that happens, just to let you know, is my cameras will take out two streams, though, one through USB, run through HDMI. But Canon, in case any of you are looking to learn how to live stream or start YouTube IPOs, I don't know why I said IPOs, IPs, intellectual properties, the Canon cameras are phenomenal. They have the best picture quality, but they don't have what's called a clean HDMI out, which basically means what I'm showing you on the screen here is what the view screen on my camera would be showing in high definition. The problem is Canon, in their ever desire to sell more expensive cameras, made it so that viewfinder is set to go to sleep around about every 30 minutes. So it, although this time I think we got, we probably got around 30 minutes. So the camera will go black because it's like the view screen goes to sleep. My feed goes to sleep. You can hear me, but not see me. I have another camera where the feed is through USB, but that battery runs out. So that's going to be fixed. Don't worry about it. I don't know why I felt the need to explain my technological problems to you. But, Ani is sharing with us more of her things. She should be joining us on Skype, but she's not. And I'm going to rib her about that a little bit. I actually went behind the Iron Curtain with my parents a few times when I was a kid, so the Cold War fascinates me. I would imagine it would. And the more recent comment, we were always afraid of being blown to bits. And I guess the irony of it, though, is the nuke going off in Las Vegas is what ends that evil. So thoughts. Thank you. We're back to the stand. Yes, we're back to the stand, folks. Spoiler alert. That is what happens in the stand. The trash can man, in all of his pyromaniacal glory, brings back a nuclear warhead to Las Vegas. And of course, the nuclear warhead is unstable. And the hand of whatever higher power it is reaches down, sets off the nuclear warhead, and basically blows up everything in whatever radius it is, but not far enough to hurt the people in Boulder, Colorado. And, the evil is vanquished by its own desire for destruction. So that perhaps is the moral of our story, is that evil is vanquished by its own desire for power and destruction, which, let's hope we're not on that same road. You know, I have a very sort of dark mind sometimes, and one of the things that I think about is every year that I get older is another year that I don't have to worry about society eating itself alive, because it's a year closer to my not being around to see it. And I know that that's kind of a dark thought, but it is something that goes in through my head. Not really an advertisement. I often refer to somebody occupying a house that is some color of white as the Cheeto in chief. And so I'd just like to share with you that my nourishment through this, and my autofocus isn't working very well, is Cheetos. So the Cheetos hopefully will not completely overrun the government to a point where we have to worry about significant worldwide violence. We're looking at that. I'm waiting for the I'm sure there are one. If you know one, let me know. And you don't know what I'm talking about yet, but if you are familiar with a book that in which empirically illustrates the idea of climate change in the modern era, bringing about a society in which, well, quite frankly, refugee crises cause wars, and because there's no, struggle for those resources. I'm talking about aside from Mad Max. We wind up with significant violence, because that's where we're headed. And I apologize for being political, but there was a line in the West Wing. For any of you who are fans of the West Wing, I happen to be a fan of the West Wing and Aaron Sorkin's writing in general. But there's this extra episode that takes place. You may have caught it, you may not have. I don't know if it's on the Netflix streaming version. It was on the DVD collection. I'd have to check. But it's about the conflict in the Middle East, and they give this whole thing where they're talking about how terrorism started, how the crisis in the Middle East started, how the difficulties and the wars and the animosity between Semitic tribes in the Middle East. And he talks about his daughter having a professor. And the professor says, why do we have so much difficulty in the Middle East? And she gives some long, she's upset because she gave some long sort of flowery answer about why we have the conflict in the Middle East. And the professor just apparently looks at her and says, no. And she's like, what do you mean no? He says, it's because it's hot and there's no water. And I think when you really break it down as to where some of those origins start of those difficulties, it may very well be just the honest truth that it's hot and there's no water, and the world is getting hotter. And as the world gets hotter, we will have less water. And that is a crisis that is not going to ultimately go away. And for any of you out there who are saying, well, I don't know why, we talk about being due for a new ice age and we're not having the new ice age and whatever. Just wait. Just wait. I grew up in South Florida where we had to learn how hurricanes are formed in school. Maybe you had to learn that elsewhere as well. But, as the temperature of the seas change, just by degrees, not by tens of degrees, the climate changes. As the sea levels change, the climate changes. We get worse storms. We get less habitable scenarios, and the extremes of our temperatures will continue to get worse. Again, another book I'm escaping the name is escaping me, but Naomi Klein is a good one to look at for how we're all screwed. They're fucked. They don't stop. She's inept. The people are facing a depression with a possible 20% unemployment. Now resources are hitting home. Yeah, toilet paper, man. Toilet paper. I say that almost tongue in cheek, but, Ani explained to us in an earlier live stream very succinctly why the toilet paper hoarding is a thing. And I found that informative. Also, resources are going to become scarcer as climates continue to change. Here we go. Wait, this is a marathon quote for you. This goes back to my shift and elite comment. Did you know it only takes 3% of the population to organize to overthrow an established elite government? What this elite is trying to protect is access to resources like water. They profit from it. It is also why we see such an uptick in bigotry to keep the little people in line. Yet these guys are going to have a reckoning. At the risk of waxing political again, I've been saying for quite some time that the reason we need a political revolution now is to avoid a physical revolution soon. And I don't have a timeline. I mean, people are like, what does soon mean? And I don't know what soon means. I mean, I don't know when the people are going to stand up and say enough is enough. I had hoped that would happen this time around. I don't understand why you can have tens of thousands of people at a rally for change and then those tens of thousands of people don't actually show up at the polls. Of course, this was all before coronavirus. I don't understand how a political party can countenance the idea of can countenance having people gather in places with speaking out of one side of their face because it's politically expedient to maintain some sort of momentum in their view in electoral politics. The same side of their face tell us to hunker down and self-quarantine for our own safety. Again, not trying to get on a political rant. There are things I just don't understand about people. And I don't get it. I don't get it. I've been to any number of political rallies at this point for a particular candidate who is not out of the race and has not dropped out of the race, in case you were wondering who that candidate is. And the fact is there's a lot of voting still to do. And yet we have people who expect our votes against the Cheeto-in-Chief who are literally trying to suppress the opportunity for anyone in their party to vote because it could upset the momentum that they think they have with their chosen candidate, who I am very, very concerned about in general. But Ani, thank you for trying to help me out here in terms of, it's like the reckoning almost everyone had in the stand and the reckoning flag folks ultimately got in Vegas. Thank you for trying to get me back on track. Thank you for showing me the breadcrumbs back to the road. King taps into the zeitgeist. He does. King does. And King always, though, he always taps into the zeitgeist. And by King, if any of you were just joining us, because we're going all over the place tonight. We're spending time while we're awake and self-quarantined and practicing social distancing. We're spending some time together as book nerds. Yes, we're talking about Stephen King. And Stephen King always taps into the zeitgeist. In fact, he types into the zeitgeist better in in young adults than virtually anyone I've ever seen in writing. The way that Stephen King can write about particularly adolescent boys, the way that he really understands where they're coming from and is able to really illuminate that experience in his writing is extraordinary. And yes, he is so prolific that he continues to write even more and ever more prolifically in his second retirement. And thank you for that. Okay, another perfect Aniko Richards quote. We can go all over the place because we literally can't go anywhere else. So it's all right. Thank you for that. And this is a live stream, and we're not really on a clock except for the clock that the technology puts us on every half hour or so to have to reboot my camera. But King does understand the adolescent boys because he used to teach. Yes. And it gives you a different perspective. But you know what I find interesting though is, and you're absolutely right, he understands adolescent boys because he used to teach. But by the same token, it can be hard if one used to teach to convey adolescence with as much charity and empathy as Stephen King kind of puts forth. Because when you, or maybe after you're teaching, it's easier. Because when you're teaching, it's hard. It's real hard. And I think even those among us who are hanging out here tonight, who are parents, I am not, but those of you who are, I think he also was one. Thank you. This is my mom with us from the East Coast, and she is absolutely right, as is often the case. She would say she is always right, because she's my mother. But she is absolutely on the nose here. He also was one, and that's true. I like to think that I have a protagonist in my novel Gnome for Hire who is 14. And I like to think that I write him, when I'm writing his point of view, I like to think that I write him with a greater degree of empathy, having been a 14-year-old boy at one point, whether you believe I was ever a 14-year-old boy or not. I was, and so I understand the experience. It can be hard when you're in class, when you're teaching kids, particularly adolescent kids, how to be here, Mom, Ani says hi. So how to be empathetic when you're sort of in the mix of it. And I think that parents who are spending a lot more time with their adolescent kids, and some of them trying to teach their adolescent kids at this point, as places around the country are having to do some homeschooling with their children because they don't have access to any kind of setup for virtual teaching from their school teachers, are maybe getting a little taste of what we go through, although it's very different. Parents and kids interact differently than teachers and kids do. So I'm not going to say the experience is the same, but empathy for teachers is born out of parents having to spend large amounts of time where they can't send their children other places. Just saying. So, I don't know. It's hard. I went to summer camp when I was a kid, sleepaway camp, usually for most of the summer. And while I am older now, I was going to say old now. I don't consider myself old, but maybe I am. While I am older now, I can view my parents as human beings. from an adult point of view, see that they are adults with their own problems and their own issues, and always have been. Excuse me, during my entire lifetime. I have no idea what my parents did when I was at summer camp. Um, and yeah, I have no idea how my parents lived their lives as adults when I was an adolescent. And by adolescent, I mean like kind of up to 14, 15 years old, and gone all summer when their children were gone entirely all summer. As all me and my two sisters, we were usually gone for the summer. So I have no idea how my parents went about adulting during those times, but I know that they must have. And oh, my mother, not much. Okay. So, but it's a little different when you literally are kind of quarantined with your kids. Ani writes, just like the complaints and demands about homework during this time. Yeah, she had mentioned something about some parents complaining that their kids were possibly receiving homework at this point during this crisis, and other parents were complaining that their kids were not receiving enough stuff during this crisis. I had another friend of mine who was on the earlier live stream who is trying to do her best with her kid, and her kid goes to private school and is completely set up for virtual learning. So her kid's like in front of the computer going to class all day. But one of the things that shows in stark relief is how much farther behind, and this is kind of the divide between public and private education, which is a whole other animal, but whatever. As Ani said, we can wander wherever because we can't go anywhere else. I mean, you can obviously click off the live stream, but we are physically kind of stuck in a location. That dichotomy between private and public education, where my friend's kid is out of school. She goes to a private school here in town. She is out of school physically, but from like day one, they've been set up to do virtual learning opportunity and have the technology to do so, versus the public school kids that I work with, many of whom don't even have internet access to be able to be set up for virtual learning. Even if we were able to provide virtual learning opportunities, they're not set up to be able to take advantage of those virtual learning opportunities. Yeah. And, Ani so rightly states here, cuts in education hurt those who cannot afford it. Yes, they always hurt the people who most need the support of education, in my view. Education can be the silver bullet. It is what can raise people out of poverty. And I don't just mean in terms of people going to college, because let's face it, I believe, and this may be an unpopular opinion, I believe that not every kid, college is not a good fit for every kid. But I believe that every kid should be able to go to college. And, I've said it before, I'll say it again. When I was living in Homestead, Florida, teaching night school and day school, when I would leave after being there teaching classes all day and then classes at night, the single most important person in the world, the most valuable person in the workforce to me at that time, was the person who worked the drive-thru at Taco Bell. They were absolutely the most important person in the workforce to me at that time, because they were still open and I had been working all day and I was hangry. So, it's sad that working any kind of minimum wage job is absolutely not enough to support a single person, much less a family, and we're still quibbling over a living wage in an increase in the minimum wage. Sorry, politics again. But the fact is that even taking it beyond that, even taking it beyond minimum wage workers in like fast food, or tip workers in food services, it's really not good. Because the fact of the matter is, trade schools are equally important. We need people who work with their hands. We need people who are skilled labor. Another example from life. It's example for a life moment here on the Inkstain channel. When I bought my house, I had a dog who liked to chew on things. All dogs like to chew on things. But Brutus, the late great Brutus, may he chase butterflies forever wherever he is. He chewed his way through the hose that went from the water supply to the toilet and the toilet itself, and he chewed his way through that hose. And aside from the flooding, which was kind of easy enough to clean up, I needed a new hose. And my first impulse was to call a plumber, as one does when one has plumbing work to do. And I called the plumber and I got an estimate. He was like, well, it's going to be $50 to get me out of there, and then $50 per hour at least, depending on what work I need to do, plus the cost of parts and what have you. So I was looking, I didn't have a home warranty at the time. So I was looking at probably $200 for him to come out and replace this hose. Well, I went to the hardware store and around the corner, and I bought the hose for $1 and connected it. So nothing against plumbers at all. What I'm trying to illustrate is your average person lives in a state of ineptitude and lives in a state of helplessness because we haven't had to learn how to not be in our society. We know how to find corollaries between the Bible, Stephen King, Stephen Hawking, and astrophysics if you're ridiculously overeducated, but we don't know how to change a light bulb. I mean, yes, that's hyperbole, but you get my point. So someone can make really good money changing that light bulb for us. And I'm not minimizing plumbing to changing a light bulb, but what I'm saying is skilled labor are not less than jobs. They're not jobs that are less than the intellectual set. Sometimes we think, wow, wouldn't it be sometimes I think that wouldn't it be great if I was doing something where I could use my hands and make a living making something, building something, not to quote Walt Whitman or the musical Working, but, see that building. I was the one that drafted the plans. I was the one, I was the one that did the design. I was the one that drafted the plans, every detail and every line, and just on down the road, just like the songs say, all the live long day. It takes everybody, and while not everybody will go to college, or not everyone should go to college, if that's not where their interests lie, everyone should be able to go to college or trade school. Finances should not be a part of that. Big quote from Ani. It's why boomers got access once they started cutting education to force privatization. Friedman trickled down. We see less funding opportunity and failing schools to push vouchers. The Russians didn't launch Sputnik. Our education system wouldn't have gotten such a boost in the late 50s to 60s. The boomers and Gen Xers had the opportunities kids today's don't. You're right. I say that as a Gen Xer. You're right. And it's sad because they should. The janitor, as important. Yes. My mother's a progressive and doesn't know it sometimes. Because my mom is just my mom. She doesn't think, I don't think. I'm not saying she doesn't think. She doesn't see the world in the same political spectrum that I do. But my mom's a progressive. And yes, the janitor, not as important as the teacher, equally important as the teacher, and sometimes more so. I mean, who is it that is reporting to schools right now to make sure that those who in the administration who still have to go to our schools are able to do so safely. It's the janitors. It's, right now, it is the workers at the lowest socioeconomic tier sometimes of our society that make it possible for the rest of us to survive. And it is remarkably troubling that they are not considered on par by the elites in our society. And I want to make a clarification when I say the elites in our society. I'm talking about the consultant class, the class that feathers their nest and makes massive profits, not really doing much of anything, not really creating anything, but who feels that somehow their opinion is more valuable than the rest of our lives. That the consultancy who profits off of the fact that things don't get done. If we were to pass things like gun control legislation, then there would be lobbyists all over Washington, D.C. who are out of work because they make money doing nothing except trying to put forth others' opinion and convince other people to buy into other people's opinions. But they work as that sort of snaky go-between that makes the argument, that makes the inability to work together profitable. And the inability to work together has become so much more profitable than, it's funny because what I was just saying, if I had been turned off on purpose, it would have seemed like a conspiracy. But they have made not solving anything infinitely more profitable than doing right for the people who are electing our quote-unquote elected officials. There's more money to be made in not representing the will of the people who gave you your job to represent them. Wow, political rant, sorry. Ani had something to share. Yes, but the janitor doesn't have to complete. Yes. With years of continuing education to prove that he or she can do his or her job. Everyone has their job, yet some of us have to jump more hoops. Janitors are important. Teachers are under a microscope. Yes, they are. And as I said, janitors, in my view, janitors are not more important, but they're also not less important. And we're talking about importance here. I would be the last one to say that education shouldn't count for something in terms of how much income potential we have. But by the same token, I also know that that as a teacher, we are in a very bizarre context because there have been times as a teacher when I have made less money than the janitor at the school. Despite having to jump through those hoops, being under a microscope, having all of those years of continuing education. And hey, I just renewed my license. I just renewed my license just now. Well, not just now, but this year. And, jumping through those hoops was expensive. I'm not sure what exactly, here we go. Sorry, y'all. I'm not sure what exactly you mean in terms of different expectations of importance. I'm just saying that the truth of the matter is that everybody in the working class is undervalued, whether that be educators, whether that be janitors, whether that be plumbers. Sometimes it seems like to do our jobs, and I don't work as a teacher anymore, but sometimes it seems that to do our jobs, we are dependent on people to be able to do their jobs, and the jobs that are required in order to allow us to do our jobs are sometimes undervalued, at least in the schools, and in particular in the public schools. The people who have chosen to be educated and more educated and more educated, have, sometimes I'm not saying we, like Ani or me, sometimes it's forgotten that in order for us to be successful and do our jobs, it requires a lot of other people to do jobs that are often looked down upon, or we couldn't do our jobs at all, or our jobs either. And I'm not saying that interpersonally is Ani or me, or by any means my mom, or any of you watching on this live stream. I'm just saying that we undervalue our workforce. I don't think any of us would argue that we undervalue our workforce and overvalue the consultant class and the legislative elites who are so busy trying to tell us what our opinion is that they never bother to listen to what our opinion is. Yes, you can quote me on that one. And that's very sad to me, that those legislators or those candidates who choose to listen to us, choose to value our working people, as Nina Turner often refers to them, our workaday men and women. You're supposed to represent our workaday men and women. You're not supposed to represent your huge campaign contributors. That's what's so frightening. That the consultant class does not value the people that enable them to have jobs at all. 15 units per year now. My class on the Holocaust was canceled, so I only went to one class. I hope they change that new rule to drive us out of the profession. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, this is a local kind of thing that Ani's talking about here in terms of 15 units per year now, but I'm fairly certain that I could be wrong. So don't quote me on this one. We used to have to do a certain number of continuing education credits in order to get our license renewed. They've since changed that. It was 6 continuing education units. No, 7 continuing education units. And how they determined what those continuing education units were very bizarre. And almost always they had nothing to ever do with what I was actually teaching, or in this case, what I do as a speech pathologist in the school district. But I need to keep my teaching license current. Nonetheless, now they're changing it to a 15 units per year now, but the way that they determine what those units are is different. And so, but I do believe that more of our continuing education that we do as part of the function of our job is applicable to those 15 units per year, whereas none of it used to be. So again, don't quote me on that. I'm not entirely sure about it. I don't have to worry about it for another 7 years. And chances are, and I'm not saying that I don't care about it because I don't have to worry about it for another 7 years. I'm just saying I haven't researched the details because it's not something I have to deal with for another 7 years. So I can't really speak intelligently about it, and I would rather not speak about it than give bad information. Now, Ani put another statistic out here. Only 30% of the people's will is legislated. The rest is K Street. And you're right, but I thought it was less than 30%. If it's 30% now, I thought it was something closer to like 2% of the people's will being legislated. But if it's up to 30, then, we're making progress, I say sarcastically. And even thinking about it requires me to have more hard cider. Which, by the way, plenty of hard cider At the grocery store, no toilet paper. But that's road we've already tread. So bringing it back over to books, I do think, or I do wonder, how much creativity will be fostered during this time, during this self-quarantine time, during this social distancing time. And it brought to mind a couple of pieces of pop culture phenomena that happened recently. And that kind of struck me in terms of the way people had to sort of go on with their lives and yet adjust their lives at the same time. So, a couple of things. One being Bird Box, and the other being A Quiet Place. Now, both of them are things where there's a physical, or at least a fightable in some way, an actual tangible manifestation of evil, badness, threat. But in A Quiet Place, it's by sound that these things are attracted. In Bird Box, if you see it, that's what causes you to kill yourself. So, here we've got sight, we've got sound. Both of these two things are ways in which we interact with other people, with the outside world. And we have to find ways, in the context of these two creative offerings, we have to find ways in which to interact differently. And it kind of struck me as interesting in our current situation, because we're having to kind of find ways to interact differently. Now, not everyone is, and it's becoming bizarre, because I'm going to be honest with you, I am a little annoyed with one of my renters right now, because while I am not necessarily as much in a risk factor to get this virus and have it be debilitating or impact me in a truly significant way were I to get it, I do have an elderly roommate, but I do have another roommate who is really far kind of right-wing, another renter, and he thinks this is a hoax. He thinks we are self-quarantining unnecessarily. He thinks that this is some kind of left-wing plot to take away his freedoms, and I have never seen him angry. I mean, the thing is, he's a nice guy. He just has a completely different political ideology, and sometimes that comes into stark relief. So he was furious. I've never seen him furious before, but he was furious because the casinos were closed. He couldn't go gamble. And he's like, the inconvenience of things being closed is angering him significantly. As he tries to go about and live life normally, with complete disregard of whether or not he's carrying this illness, can spread this illness, or what have you. If not to people outside, to the people he lives with. So it's weird. It's like we're living in different realities. Another TV show that kind of comes to mind, and again, this one's more in this sort of weird, bizarre, post-apocalyptic fantasy vein, is the Apple TV Plus show C. And it was fascinating to me when watching that, how they sort of overcome the fact that everybody in the world, except for like 2 people or 3 people, and the entire world population at that point is blind. Now, of course, there's a global pandemic which gets everyone sick, and that's why people are born blind. So it is kind of related, but how they find a different way to interact. And so how will this impact writers of today and writers of tomorrow? and what will be created. I mean, I'm really fascinated to find out or to hear what will be created out of this experience. And Ani apparently has a similar thought. My question is how this event is going to affect future writers like then Cold War affected Stephen King, you know? I remember once being snowed in for a February back in '84. No pump for water, no electricity, just a wood stove. I went to school 2 days that month, yet remember really connecting with winter's nature. Snow hikes, sledding, shivering by the fire. But that experience left a mark on me. This coronavirus shut-in will mark a generation. Absolutely. And it won't just mark, it is currently marking a generation. And I think it will mark different generations differently. I mean, it's marking us. It's marking you who are watching. It's marking me, you know, sort of rambling on out into the void of my camera, knowing that there are 5 people here with me. So we haven't yet reached our limit on people that could congregate in person. But you know, as we communicate in this vein, or as we share community in this vein, it reminds me of many notions that I could choose to write about. I think I've probably outlined ideas for maybe 3 different books right now, since in just the past few days that we've been in this sort of quasi quarantine scenario. You know, books about what if it's worse than we actually know it is or think it is. What if it's less than what we know it is or think it is. Well, I got to share this one. No, I got to finish my thought. Then I'll share on the screen, you know, the latest of the Ani observations. But the truth is, you know, I've looked at this stuff, and you know, it's about wondering what is the angle that I'm going to want to take on it. And not only that, then there's the business side of me, which looks at marketability and who's going to be the first, you know, or how can I veil this experience into an allegory that is going to fit with my own writing voice and an original narrative. So there's a whole lot to it. Ani's observation, I don't agree because it's mean. Yeah, but we're Gen X. We state the obvious and watch the world burn. I don't think so. You know, I don't know that I state the obvious and watch the world burn. I like to think that I try to inspire or encourage people not to let the world burn. But, you know, we're getting to a point. I don't know what it's going to look like after this election season, because, you know, politically, I speak to a lot of young people, and one of the things that I've talked about is, you know, I kind of sort of got activated in 2000, and then after it was clear that, or seemed clear to me at the time, that didn't matter how activated I got, Washington was going to do what Washington was going to do. I felt at that point, particularly with the Supreme Court pretty much choosing our president for us and putting him in the White House, and then him sending people to war, including friends of mine, you know, I tuned out and decided that eventually I would try and start a nonprofit, in which I'm still working through, and trying to make the world a better place through the humanities. But then I became reactivated in 2016, and again had hope that somehow we would be able to change the political structure of things. And then worked over the past 3 years very, very hard through political organizations and whatnot to try and change things for the better. And now we are where we are again, where we have people being encouraged to vote by an establishment so that they don't lose their edge on an election that they have no business winning anyway, because the generation that is foisting, and yes, I said foisting their ideas, their outdated ideas on younger generations who are going to have to live with the consequences that they will not have to live with. And self-promoting, self-interested corporate class, an elite class that wants us to just sit by and watch them destroy everything, because of their profits and their addiction to power. So I get where you're coming from, and I get where you're saying, when I sort of rebutted Ani's remarks, she said it's all we can do. I can't allow myself to believe that, because that way lies despair. One thing I can tell you, hold on, got to do the elephant here. One thing that I can tell you is I'm wondering where the art is. And I know why we don't have the artist uprising that we should. I know when the decline in activist artists started, and I know why it did. I've taught it at the college level, why art of protest has declined, and I don't want to sound professorial. I'll save that, for a request if anyone wants me to do that at another time. But the fact is, the artists are not standing up. The creators are not standing up and using art, which is the basis of propaganda, to go against the propaganda that we're being fed hours and hours at a time on the daily. So, it's when I used to think, when are the artists going to stand up and inspire? So I can't control the fact that culture art in this country is a commercial enterprise. And support for self-expression is not in any way a priority to Washington, D.C., or almost any other candidate than the one that I already support. But I still can't not do anything, which is why I still create. And hopefully the work that I do will have meaning, or at least provide a perspective after this time to others to avoid being in this time. I don't know. I don't want to sound like I have an overestimated view of my own self-importance, which I certainly do not. Ani states, the elites are shifting. When elites shift, the common man and women are thrown in front of the gun. French Revolution, Russian revolutions, plural, Chinese Revolution. So when you go down this vein of not knowing what this election will be, that's what is happening. People want equilibrium. They're finding comfort in what they know. That's why Biden is being pushed. People are afraid of revolution, especially in the face of the chaos we've seen in Trump. Yeah, I don't know. I agree with you. I agree that that is what the result is. That's why we're seeing, that's an accurate analysis of why we're seeing what we're seeing. I get you there, but it doesn't piss me off any less, because a return to those politics, a return to that era, does nothing except return us to the exact same circumstances that gave rise to our current situation, and doesn't change really anything, and keeps us on the same hamster wheel of bad leaders, bad leadership, or inept leadership, or non-existent leadership, or leadership for profit, which is not leadership at all. But I get where you're coming from. The you know, but it doesn't change my underlying question though, which is I've been to incredible rallies with experiences of saying there's absolutely no way that if all of these people who are willing to show up to a rally are willing to vote, there's no way we can lose. And yet the next day people don't show up to actually do the work. They just show up for the party. And maybe that's a generational thing. And, you know, yeah. That way lies madness. That way lies madness, and a rant in another location. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the overall idea, Ani, where you were going with it, before we went down a road, for me anyway, all too often traveled, but for some a road less traveled. Yeah, we the instability of our country is what brings about the inability to adequately deal with our current crisis, and taken to its extreme, which fortunately for us, nature has not taken it to its extreme, as we wind up with a situation like a global pandemic, risking the illness, which is to its extreme what is illustrated in The Stand. Because when all of those power structures are wiped away, there is no, all that you're left with is human nature, which will either be wanting to create something new or wanting to capitalize and take advantage of the instability. You know, we either become more spiritual, more compassionate, more feeling beings, or we become more opportunistic and more mercenary. And yes, that's very black and white. And I know that in reality, we look at things that are more nuanced and more in between. But in the context of The Stand, it's very clearly laid out. What I never understood about The Stand is why everybody settles in the West. I guess I could ask Stephen King someday if were I to ever meet him. But I don't understand. We have Boulder, of course, yes, up in the mountains, beautiful place. And we have Vegas, which is, well, Vegas. And so why everything is sort of the Rockies and West when humanity finds places to, I guess, hunker down and repopulate in whatever mode they try to hunker down and repopulate, either through the opportunistic model or the altruistic model. They do it Rockies and West. Why everyone stays away from the East, I got no idea. But I have often wondered that. Now, this is Ani's statement, not mine, but I am going to read it and do the elephant. Millennials and Gen Z are flaky as fuck. They are. It's almost like even when you speak with them, they're trying to be ironic. Go to the rally, skip the work of voting. I definitely understand my parents' reaction to our generation, but at least we had cool music. Yeah, I'd say we had cool music. Some of our choices, some of our fashion choices growing up, I think are a bit questionable. But yes, we did have cool music. They have cool music now, though. There's always been cool music. It's just, I think every generation thinks their music was cooler. I'm still a big fan of the Doors, and they're well before my generation. But then again, Jim Morrison was a poet. But again, so was Tupac. So what are you going to do? Both dead before their time. Very sad. I feel like Billy Crystal right now. So yeah, why locationally we're at the Rockies and West? I don't really know. But it is something I often wondered. but hey, okay. Our fashion choices was called comfortable. I don't know. I don't think the MC Hammer pants, the genie shoes, the long coats in the middle of summer that I wore in 1988 after seeing the Lost Boys in 1987 in the middle of summer in South Florida. I don't know how comfortable those fashion choices were, but they were kind of cool in retrospect, although not so much anymore in reality. Although the Lost Boys will always be cool, just saying. But he or she who has never worn combat boots and along with jean shorts, let them cast the first stone. You and I got to graduate during the grunge era. Bye, Mom. I understand it's 4 a.m. where you are. Thank you for signing on. But and stay safe, Mom. So, Continental Divide. Do you think so? Why it was Colorado in the West? Lost Boys was an excellent film. If I would ask you to illuminate what you mean by Continental Divide, because there was no natural disaster in the Stand that would have caused that necessity. And at least it was in the Stand. It's only described as everyone come to Nebraska. I mean, so they're in the Midwest, and then and then she's given to know, and she's in the way of knowing that that they need to move on to Boulder. Time to be Mike TV again. She's in the way of knowing that they have to move on to Boulder, but why exactly Boulder? I don't know. I can understand Sin City in Vegas, but other than the fact that Boulder, Colorado is a very pretty place, the Rocky Mountains literally is a continental. I know, I understand that. I'm just saying, I don't know why that happens in that way. It's not. Let me change that. We can speculate all we want, and I have no problem with speculating. I'm just saying that it's never explained really in the book as to why that happens. It's not like any of them are trying to find natural locales in which to escape the virus that they're all immune to anyway. If you're a fan of Sci-Fi TV, otherwise known as Canadian science fiction, if you've watched Van Helsing, for example, it makes sense that they try and they're going to Denver. That they're going to Denver to because it's higher, and they're by going to the station in Colorado, it's above cloud cover, and so bad for vampires, or at least they think it is. And of course, by the time they get there, it's a whole other story. But I get that. It's never really explained in the Stand as to why the decision is made to go there, except that she's in the way of knowing that that's where she's going to have to go. Yes, I agree. I see 6 people. You see 8 people. So maybe you're a little bit ahead of me. I see 6 people. And the yeah, okay. So, sorry, I got sidetracked by Ani's comment. She's saying, I just think King uses it as a device to literally show a dividing line between good and evil. It helps as a construct. I understand, but I understand what you're saying with the continental divide, but it's pretty close to the dividing line, don't you think? And I just wonder why everyone just sort of gives up on the entire East. So, just saying. It's a curiosity, which I'm sure as an author, and you as a person who writes as well, I imagine the fact is that it could be something as simple as I like Boulder, Colorado, and it's pretty. And if the world were going to end, that's where I'd want to be, considering it's cold in Maine anyway. And so it's equally cold in Colorado, but prettier or prettier in its own way and in the mountains. So it may be strategically better. I don't know. I read too much fantasy too. So I fully admit reading fantasy makes you also, but I'm talking about modern epic fantasy, your Robert Jordans, your George R.R. Martins, hell, even your Christopher Paolini's, although reading Christopher Paolini is kind of like reading other people. It causes you to kind of think of natural terrain and strategy and whatnot. Oh, yeah. I'm ahead of you on this. Yeah, there is a delay. And there is a dividing line. I get it. I just don't understand why there isn't more real estate between the two factions. Yeah, I know. There's. I think I heard, Ani, that there's something like a 30-second delay between when you post your comments and when I actually get them here. Because of the live stream. But I agree. I'm still showing 6 people. If there's 8, even better. And I'll say again, you can join the conversation if you want to join with your own voice and your own face. And I think less lag time. You can jump onto Skype at this Skype address up here. So far, I'm the only person on the call, but the call should be active. So you can jump on there if you want to talk in real time. And please, of course, leave comments if you have a comment you want to leave. It doesn't even have to be a good one. Just join the conversation. This is meant to be a conversation rather than me just, running my mouth here because I have no one to talk to but my animals and, cranky older people. And there's also... You can, if you're following on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe. If you're on Facebook, please like and follow. The more like and subscribes we have, the better off we're going to be. And the more people get notified. And if you hit the bell on YouTube, you will be notified anytime we post new videos. And most of the videos that I will be posting will probably not be live streams, although some of them will be, particularly during this particular crisis going on right now. A lot of live streaming will be going on because it's a way to connect. It's a way to connect when otherwise we would be isolated, and it's a way to share fellowship and community. So yeah, like and subscribe on YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not watching on YouTube, eventually go to YouTube, look for the Inkstain channel, and like and subscribe, hit the bell so that you will know when we post new content. Okay, commercial done. Again, you can go to Skype for those of you who just joined us and join in the conversation in real time. And of course, leave a comment if you are so inclined so that we know you're there. So we've been talking about a lot of stuff. We've been meandering about this stream. We were on for about an hour before, maybe an hour and a half before, and then we took a break, and now we've been on for another 2 hours. We shut my mom down. My mom was on for a while, but it's 4 o'clock a.m. where she's at, so she signed off and had to go. But I don't know if any of my other relatives are on. I think my Aunt B was on for a while. And if she missed me saying hi, then, and if she's still on, hi, Aunt B. She's in, at least last time I checked, she was in the same time zone. So it is 1 o'clock in the morning here. And I don't know if any of my other peeps are on. I'm sure my peeps are on, but family is on. And if you are, say hi. But Ani just mentioned, I do not have Skype on my phone, never use it. Neither did I, honestly. I am much more, if I'm going to do voice calling, video calling, whatever, I'm much more a Whereby person, which used to be Appearin or Zoom. I do most of my video calling that way, but the software that I use for Mac to be able to live stream here, to be able to live stream to multiple places at once, and to utilize the better quality camera interfaces, that's how I can get people to call in, is Skype. And it's free, so there's no reason why, if you wanted to participate, you absolutely couldn't. But I understand it could be an inconvenience to some who are not used to using Skype. I hadn't used it until I started live streaming for Progressive Voice earlier in the week. But that's how we roll here on the Ecamm Live. I'm aphasia again. The Ecamm Live ecosystem. That's the word I was looking at. Is Skype. So if you want to do it, do it. If you don't, I'm certainly not judging. But again, right here is the address to the Skype call if you want to hop on Skype. And if you do hop on Skype, I am able to just pop you in here so you can talk with all of us all at once, just like that. So it is as it is. We've been talking about Stephen King's The Stand, which is particularly relevant to our current situation, although much, much, much more extreme than what we're dealing with. So people don't get scared by the book. Don't get scared by The Stand. It's just, the same circumstances maybe that led to that, as Ani Richards, who is on here with us in comments, pointed out. Our current political system has led us to our current state now, similar to the system as it was in the 1970s, when Stephen King was writing The Stand. As a book itself, I felt for a very long time that it is truly a work of a 20th century masterpiece, in that it truly is 20th century literature. And it was written at a time when Stephen King was not a very respected writer based on his writing ability. Commercially, The Stand was his fourth book, and he was already successful with the first three. But he wasn't respected really as a writer at that point. I felt that The Stand is a masterpiece of 20th century literature. And then, of course, he had to go and write more, and write the Dark Tower series, and which he had started before he started The Stand, but he wound up finishing that, and which just became this magnum opus. And he has written things and gained a respect, not just as a pop novelist or a pulp novelist, but as a writer in later works. And it would just be stupid for me to talk to you about what an impact he has had on writing in the 20th and 21st century, because that goes without saying. And as I mentioned before, of course, he has written more in his second retirement and than most people write in their entire career. We also discussed earlier in a live stream, for those who just came on, that apparently the way to get through self-quarantining is to keep a steady buzz throughout the process. Not a debilitating one, not one that keeps you from being able to function, but certainly not. But apparently that's the way to go, is to keep a slight buzz throughout. Let's look at this. A meme. I saw a meme today highlighting The Shining, which said something to the effect of solitude with the family. Exactly. Solitude with the family. What could go wrong? And we're not, here in Vegas, we're not in the winter months like they might be still. I don't know. Or if you're somewhere where it snows, are you all still dealing with snow in true wintry weather? I'm curious. But that's an excellent meme. A buzz to get you through. Another wise statement. A buzz to get you through the WTF now, right? I am not. I am not by and large much of a drinker, but yeah, I did kind of stock up on libations to try and perhaps get me through the duration. And besides, maybe if you get drunk enough, you can peel off the labels and use those for toilet paper, since apparently that's the new thing that we all need to be hoarding is toilet paper. But we also, for those of you who are joining us a little long into this marathon live stream here, we also learned why we are hoarding toilet paper. Ani shared with us that truth. Oh, what's up, John? Okay. Apparently there's a request for creative work on my part. This is going into the Wayback file for any of you who are on the stream that go way back. Don't come see this part 2. I wrote a play that I guess it's John now. I think it was Gianni before. That he was in, actually, back in the Stone Age when I was teaching high school theater. And it was a play that I had written and subsequently had produced in a number of places now, called Don't Come See This, which was basically a send-up of the Art Nouveau kind of experimental theater trend that was going on towards the end of the late 20th century. A lot of really kind of self-indulgent, incomprehensible stuff. And I had just seen this really terrible production of Macbeth. And I'm not in a theater, so I don't mind saying that. But this really terrible production of the Scottish play, and was trying to write the worst possible play I could imagine to sort of get the production of Macbeth out of my head. And so I wrote this play. Anyway, and he was in it, and it is lovely to see you, sir. Thank you for hopping on the live stream. Join in on the conversation. We're sharing fellowship here and community while we are social distancing. And I figure we'll be on for just a little bit longer here. And then this initially started, ladies and gentlemen, just in case you're wondering, I was testing the software for launching the Inkstain channel. And yes, you did. You played the hetero challenge director. Absolutely. The hetero. Yes, Kevin is displeased. Kevin is. Oh God! Don't make me start. Kevin is displeased. Yes, I grew up around a lot of people in the theater community who were varied and had varied lifestyle choices, and that character of Kevin, yes, sometimes terrible. No, I really. Oh wow, John, you're gonna have to. John, here, I want to share with the group. Yeah, get in touch, man. You have me on Facebook. You're moving to Vegas in July. You're saying hi, neighbor. Well, hello, neighbor. Get in touch. We'll do coffee. We'll do something. I love seeing grown-up people who I knew when they were not grown-up people, or slightly less grown-up people than they are now. I would really look forward to that. That would be phenomenal. And welcome to Vegas. So yeah, I grew up around a lot of very, very varied communities. Yeah, I'm telling a story out of school. My mom's off now. It would have been interesting to tell this story while she was on. When my parents separated and got divorced, I was about 16 years old. I was kind of a rebellious kid, but my mom wanted to sort of keep me close, and she was meeting a lot of people on South Beach, and she knew a lot of people who were in the drag lifestyle. A lot of really, yes, let's do lunch. Let's do lunch, John. When you get out here, people in the drag community who had really old school drag community, who had been involved in that community all the way since burlesque and the Algonquin Round Table and all those things, who had had a heyday but had since kind of retired into South Florida. And so that's a lot of the community that I was surrounded with in my teens, my mid-teens, when my parents had separated. And Johnny Wolf was on, another friend of mine, close friend of mine, former student from back in the day. Keep in mind, when I say that, friends, former students, whatever, I want to clarify. I started teaching high school when I was 23 years old, and I was kind of a hard ass. I felt the weight of the entire 5 years difference between me and the seniors that I was teaching, and felt that I needed to be even more of a hard ass because I was so close in age to the students that I taught. So when I say, friends, former students, they're all in their mid-30s at this point. So they're grown-ups in their own right. I don't see the difference to be as socially distanced. I'm in my mid-40s. They're in their mid-30s. We're basically contemporaries now. So, anyway, Johnny Wolf, a close friend of mine, more like family than anything else. He was on earlier, and we were talking. I'm trying to figure out how this related. So the drag queens, I don't know. We got from drag queens to me teaching high school. I don't know how we got there, except that I was 1997, 23 years. Jeez, exactly. Thanks. I didn't mean to make you feel old, Donnie. So I was surrounded by a lot of people, and those people had an impact. And when you write plays, when you write books, anything you write, the people that you meet come out. Pardon the turn of phrase in this context, but they emerge onto the page as you write. And before my parents had split, my dad was involved a lot in community theater. My dad has since passed, but he can certainly be credited for my sisters and I being exposed to theater from a very, very young age. And there was a director, and they hired this director for this community theater in Long Island. And the director was from Manhattan, I think, or had moved from Manhattan, and his name was Kevin. And Kevin referred to himself in the third person. And so he would literally say, and this was a quote that John's character had in this play, he would clap like this. And almost everything that Kevin said as he spoke in the third person sounded like he was singing a show tune. And it's not a stereotype. I mean, it's taken directly from this actual person. So it was, Kevin is displeased, and so the director, the sort of hack director in this play, is named Kevin, and he spouts lines in the third person about being displeased. So there you go, a little key into the world of that play. If you've ever seen it or done it in high school or been exposed to Don't Come See This by yours truly, you would have now you have an insight into where that character came from. Yeah, Finso Facto, I'm 36 now, and I remember having a blast acting in the play. Thank you. Always remember your work. Thank you, man. That's really, that's moving. I'm really moved by that. Thank you. I remember all of you. That was a very impactful time. And I feel like at that point I was really kind of 100% focused on doing that particular job to the best of my ability. And because of that, and the hours that people put together in a theater program, the hours that I put in producing work in that theater program, and the way that the students, Southdale High School, go Buccaneers. There is no peer to a Buccaneer. I don't know if that's still the slogan, but it was then. That program was very dear to me, and I'm glad that it had an impact on the students that participated in it, because it's about the students. It's always about the students. Ani stated, I've been teaching as many years as how old I was when I started teaching. Just turned 46. Yeah, I think I've been teaching the same number of years, but I started at a different point in that year, because I was 23 when I started teaching in the fall of being 23. So I was like 23 and a half-ish at that point. And yeah, I started substituting though in 97, started teaching full-time, I think in 97, 98 school year. So yeah, it was a long time ago. Yeah, thank you again, John, for your kind words. I'm glad that the work in the program was meaningful and still has been meaningful to you. That's what I strive for. And now that I write primarily novels, fiction, etc. Although I'm sure there's a play or two still in there somewhere. I'm mindful. My experience educating young people, both as a teacher and serving young people as a therapist, both in spiritual counseling and in speech therapy. I stay mindful of the material that I write that is directed towards the young people who are the demographic that I write for. I'm currently providing services in the secondary environment. So I provide services for young people from 6th grade all the way up, through 12th grade. And particularly the younger demographic of that, I'm constantly mindful as I write Gnome for Hire, and as I continue to outline and prepare to write the sequel to that, which is designed to be at least a trilogy and possibly more later on. That the messages that are sent in that are always in the forefront of my mind as I create material for young people to consume. Another sort of preview, moving away from the stand just a little bit, another influential series that I have outlined the videos for, that I'll be putting on Inkstain channel is The Chronicles of Prydain by Lord Alexander. And if any of you out there have read The Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander, certainly come and join us when we get to that video. Come and join us before we get to that video on Inkstain channel, but certainly come when we get to that video. Supernatural Western. Yeah, that would be great, man. I will get back to The Chronicles of Prydain as well. But yeah, Gian, if your wife is writing, I do a writers group out here in Las Vegas, sort of a writers circle, as it were. And I may actually be moving that kind of more online, but it will still be meeting in person once we get through this crisis. I know I'm touching my face. And absolutely, I would love to meet you and your wife regardless, because that is always such a great experience for me, and always such a pleasure to see. But yeah, absolutely, we'll talk when July, when you move out here. We'll do lunch. We'll have a nosh. We'll talk books. We'll talk supernatural stuff because that's where I write, and we'll go from there. I don't know why with the hands and the, and channeling my grandfather here. I see the markers and patterns between characters based on the generations I teach. Even elder millennials different from younger millennials and Gen Z. What affects them, 9/11 or pandemic 20. It's interesting. It's an interesting well to tap when writing. Yeah, it absolutely is. And that's kind of getting back. I need to keep Prydain in my mind because there was a point that I meant to get you there. But yeah, and that is why the longer it takes for a book to get out there, Known for Hire, because I was getting out of grad school, starting a teaching gig, starting another teaching gig, doing all of these things between the time when that book started and when I finished writing the first draft and then the draft and that draft. So much time had passed. It was like 10 years worth of time. So going back to do the final polish and rewrite, which I'm hoping I'm doing soon, is there's a lot that has to be changed because the experiences of the kids that the book is geared toward, or the young people. Now, I say the book is geared toward ages 11 to 11, but there are still sensibilities that need to kind of be altered because you certainly don't want your 14-year-old. You certainly don't want your 14-year-old protagonist to tell what amounts today to dad jokes. It's not going to work. The other book, the paranormal, supernatural thriller kind of intellectual property, the themes in that are not as changing because the mythology mined for that is so much older in so many ways. But the Chronicles of Prydain I bring up because that was really the first series that impacted me as an adolescent. And taught me a lot. My doctoral dissertation, yes, I've been working on a doctorate, but my doctoral dissertation is primarily on how spiritually, in dealing with multiple levels of existence and spirituality, are the characters that we interact with in fiction, mythology, etc. If we develop an emotional attachment to them, which we know we do. I mean, we see people all the time who watch soap operas not being able to distinguish the actors from the characters they play. We have book nerd people, like people who would generally look at Inkstain Channel, who talk about characters in the series that they love, and they talk about what that character is going to do and what that character did, kind of as if they're real people, even though they're the creation of an author. And while on one sense we recognize that it's fiction, on an emotional sense, in terms of our psychology, we deal with these people. They have a psychological impact on us, as old friends or enemies or people that we encounter in our everyday physical lives. So yeah, I'm not recommending anyone read my dissertation for fun, but ultimately that's the core of what that's about. So when I look at the Chronicles of Prydain, I remember buying the book because it looked cool, because there was a guy with a sword on it and three haggy kind of people that looked kind of like the Stygian witches, and I liked Clash of the Titans, the original Clash of the Titans, and there was a pretty redheaded girl on it, and I cannot now, nor have I ever been able to really resist a pretty redheaded woman, particularly of the smart variety, and many are, and I was just nuts over the Ellen Wee character in the Chronicles of Prydain. Even as a 12-year-old, I was spoiled for my interrelationships for the rest of time. But on a more serious note, the Chronicles of Prydain, particularly the Black Cauldron, the books are all about identity, and the protagonist is a young man who's kind of an adolescent at the beginning of the series. It's a 5-book series in fairly short books, but he's trying to find out who he is, literally, but also figuratively, and kind of the answer being we are who we make ourselves to be. But the Black Cauldron, which if you've never read the Black Cauldron and you've only seen the Disney movie, you're missing out if that's your bag, if that's your cup of tea. Because the Disney movie sucks of the Black Cauldron. It eviscerates any of the actual meaning of the book. We talked earlier about adaptation. This is just a bad adaptation that doesn't even get the heart or the feeling of the book together in there. But the book, The Black Cauldron, is very much about that. It also teaches things about friendship and honor and self-sacrifice and so many things. And it is the first book series that I ever read. Of course, it's fantasy, which was my bag then, as it is now. But first book series I ever read, and it still has a profound impact on me. And it also had a profound impact on my writing of young people. And it also had a profound impact on many, many other writers. One could arguably say, considering the fact that it's based on Welsh mythology and Lloyd Alexander is Welsh, I believe, or British at the very least. I know for a fact that Lloyd Alexander's Chronicles of Prydain had a significant impact on Joe Rowling, and so one could arguably say no Chronicles of Prydain, no Harry Potter, and what a loss that would have been for all of us. So, again, that's a good equivalency. I had kind of given a teaser earlier on, but I'll be more blatant now because it's later. But no Elric, no Geralt of Rivia. Just saying, it's fact. No Thomas Covenant. No Chronicles of Thomas Covenant the Unbeliever. Probably no Dark Tower. And in fact, I believe, and certainly no Stand. Because even in his introduction to The Stand, Stephen King makes that equivalency. So, I mean, that's kind of what we'll be talking about on the Inkstain channel in the videos that deal specifically with direct books, is going to be the equivalencies of, if not this, then not that. But as it relates to fantasy, science fiction, and horror. There will also be, some book reviews, literary rants. As we see 2.5 hours into this live stream, I can do a rant. But these will be much more compact. And chats with you, live streams with you guys, as time permits. And also tips, tricks, writing, etc. So I'm going to actually close this down because it's been 2.5 hours at this point, and my poor dogs, Macduff and Oberon, are probably wondering if Daddy still lives here, because my studio space is actually out in an area of my garage. So not that you could tell from the lovely green screen, but nonetheless, you guys are probably tired of me now anyway, and I don't want you to be. I want you to come to Inkstain channel, go to YouTube, find Inkstain channel. I will put a link on the Facebook page so that you can get there. Much shorter videos, but really been working hard to make this experience of value and benefit to the community of book lovers and fantasy, science fiction, horror nerds. So join us over there. Remember, when you get over there, like the videos you see, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so that you're notified. If you're already on YouTube, like, subscribe, ring the bell. And I will see you guys soon. All right? Take care. Good night, Johnny. Good night, Ani. Good night to the other two people who are apparently still here. Have a wonderful night. Stay safe. Don't risk it, y'all. And I'll talk to you soon.